Well, it's great to be back here in wonderful Inverness. I forgot just how much of a tourist place Inverness was. Went out this morning earlier, walking along the river, and there must have been 30, 40, 50 buses full of tourists, picking them up and dropping them off. I thought, my God, Wolverhampton's not like that, is it? You know, we used to be in Aberdeen, but now we've gone further south. Have to say, a lot warmer than Aberdeen or Inverness, but we're going further south. But it's great to be back here with you guys in Inverness. I'm going to have a little break this week from going through Colossians, mainly because the verses that Robbie has got here are quite difficult, so I thought, he can do that, I'll do something else. So we're in Mark's Gospel, Mark chapter 6. And I wonder if you have ever felt insignificant. Maybe as an individual, or as a family, or perhaps even as a church. We may feel at times we're insignificant. What can I bring? What can I bring to this almighty, all-powerful, all-knowing, transcendent, Creator God? Who am I to bring him anything? And of course, the truth of the matter is, God doesn't need you, and he doesn't need you, and he doesn't need you, and he doesn't need me. And yet, in his wisdom, in his omniscience, the fact that he knows everything, he calls us to partner with him. And that's what I want us to think about just for a little while today, for this whole idea that Jesus invites us to partner with him. Remembering that he doesn't need us, yet he chooses to use us in his grace and in his mercy. So, John chapter 6 from verse 1. And we're picking up the Gospel in John, where Jesus has been healing the sick and teaching people. And in John 6 verse 1, it says that sometime after this, Jesus crossed to the far shore of the Sea of Galilee, that is, the Sea of Tiberias. And a great crowd of people had followed him because they saw the miraculous signs he performed on the sick. Then Jesus went up on the mountainside, sat down with his disciples. The Jewish Passover feast was near. And when Jesus looked up and saw a great crowd coming towards him, he said to Philip, "Where shall we buy bread for these people to eat?" Now he asked this only to test him, because he already had in mind what he was going to do. And Philip answered, 8 months' wages would not buy enough bread for everyone to have a bite. Another of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, spoke up. "Here is a boy with 5 small barley loaves and 2 small fish. But how far will they go among so many?" And Jesus says, "Make the people sit down." Now there was plenty of grass in that place, and the men sat down, about 5,000 of them. And Jesus took the loaves, gave thanks, and distributed to those who were seated as much as they wanted. Now he did the same with the fish. And when they had all had enough to eat, he said to his disciples, "Gather the pieces that are left over, let nothing be wasted." So they gathered them and filled 12 baskets with the pieces of the 5 barley loaves left over by those who had eaten. And when the people saw the miraculous sign that Jesus did, they began to say, "Surely this is the prophet who was to come into the world." Jesus, knowing that they intended to come and make him king by force, withdrew again to a mountainside by himself. It's a great story, isn't it? But of course it's more than a story, it's an event that actually happened in the life of Jesus. Now there's a couple of things in this story that I want us just to chew over and think about this afternoon. And then think, how can we apply what we hear, what we learn from this story into our lives? I want to say to you as an individual, as family, as church, when you feel insignificant, when you feel that what you have to bring or give to God is insufficient, remember, this God is the all-sufficient one. This is the God who needs no one and no thing outside of himself to exist. In the Old Testament, the name that is used to describe this all-sufficient one is the name El Shaddai. He's the God who is able in and of himself to be sufficient. So this all-sufficient God, why on earth would he want anything from me when what I have to give, what I have to bring, is actually insufficient? In fact, it's more than insufficient, it's insignificant. And yet this story shows us that however insufficient or insignificant we feel, the all-sufficient, all-powerful, almighty, transcendent El Shaddai wants us to partner with him. It's amazing, isn't it? And when I read this story, of course, Jesus didn't need the loaves and the fish. You remember when he was being tempted in the wilderness before he began his ministry, Satan comes to him and Satan says, you could turn these rocks into bread if you wanted to. Because he recognized that Jesus is the all-sufficient, all-powerful, all-knowing, transcendent God become flesh. And Satan recognized that Jesus, because of who he is, fully God and yet fully man, was able to take some rocks and turn them into bread. So Jesus didn't need this little boy. He didn't need this little boy's 5 loaves and 2 fish. And yet, he chose to partner with him. It's great, isn't it? He could just do whatever he wants. He doesn't need us. Yet, in his plan, in his wisdom, in his knowledge of everything, God says, Scott, I'm going to use you. And he goes, well, okay, yeah, I'm going to use you for whatever it is he's got planned and purpose, for wherever it is, in the back of beyond, in South Wales. God decides, I'm going to use you. I want you to partner with me, the all-sufficient, all-powerful, all-knowing God. It's amazing, isn't it? And I think for us to recognize the all-sufficiency of God, in all its wonder, we've actually got to, first of all, recognize how insufficient we are. How insignificant we are. In fact, we're just a speck, on a speck, on a speck, on a speck, on a speck. Multiply that millions of times. That is how insignificant we are. In fact, the psalmist says it best, doesn't he, David? What is man that thou art mindful of him? The Son of Man, that you care for him. More than that, the Son of Man, the daughter of man, who you want to partner with. God invites us. He welcomes us to join with him in mission and in ministry. And that really is what this story reveals to us, I think. One thing that I love that John records here, when Jesus looks up and he sees this vast crowd of people, and they were hungry because they followed him, they've listened to his teaching, they didn't just jump on the bus or jump in the car and get to them. They would walk for miles in the searing heat to get to wherever Jesus was. So when they get there, they follow him everywhere. He goes up the mountainside, that's no mean feat. It's not many mountainsides in Wolverhampton, do we, love? No. But great to see them around here, great to see them in South Wales. They go up the mountainside and then he's teaching them. And then he turns to Philip and says, where shall we buy bread for these people to eat? Now they didn't have an Aldi's or a Lidl or a Tesco Express on the mountainside, there was nothing. And John tells us that Jesus only asked this question because he already has in mind what he was going to do. So when you or I are facing those situations where we feel there's nothing I can bring, there's nothing I can do to turn this situation around, I am insufficient, I am insignificant in doing anything about this, Jesus already knows what he's going to do. Well, that's a great place to say amen. In your situation, whatever you are facing, either individually, as a family, as a church, I know you're looking for a home. This is a great space, isn't it? Oh my God. And just when you think you couldn't get any better, there's more. And then there's more behind the more. Wow! That's how good God is. God already knows what he's going to do with you guys. Amen. God already knows what he's going to do with this place. He already has it in mind. And he asks, where? And you're asking, where are we going to go? What is going to be our home? Jesus already has in mind what he has for ICF, what he has for this building. And when he asks the question, he only asks it to test. Test our faith, to test our resolve, to test whether we really believe him or not. And then Philip, being a bloke, tries to come up with a pragmatic answer. Lord, 8 months' wages would not buy enough bread for each one to have a bite. 8 months' wages is a lot of money. How much do you earn in a year, Monica? Let's figure out what 8 months of Robbie's salary is. See if that would be enough to feed 5,000 men plus one. I mean, it's a vast crowd, and it's a vast, and he's saying, Lord, 8 months' wages wouldn't be enough for everyone even to have a bite. He comes up with a pragmatic response. But actually, and sometimes we do that. Well, Lord, if you just do this, and this, and this, and this will be the outcome, and we'll all be happy. We try and work it out, don't we? But actually, that's no faith. Because faith walks not by sight, but by faith. Because if you can see where you're going and see what you're doing, it's not faith, is it? We walk by faith, not by sight. So he's trying to work it out in sight, thinking, oh my gosh, 8 months' salary wouldn't be enough to buy enough for everyone to have even a bite. But Jesus already knows what he's going to do. Sometimes when we look for a pragmatic answer, we miss out on the miracle. When we try and work it out, we miss out on the miracle. He already has in mind what he's going to do. He's testing Peter. And then Andrew, another of the disciples, comes up and says, Lord, here's a boy with 5 small loaves and 2 small fish. We don't know anything about the boy, we don't know his age, we don't know his name. And I remember being taught in Sunday school that this little boy willingly gives his lunch to Jesus. The Bible doesn't tell us that. The Bible doesn't say this little boy willingly surrendered his lunch to Jesus. It's almost like Andrew, there he is, there's a boy over there, look, there's a boy, and he's got packed lunch. Oh! And then the little boy out embarrassed him. Or maybe Andrew just walked up and took her off him. We don't know. very Christ-like. We don't know though. We read into things, don't we? It's lovely to think this little boy willingly offered up his packed lunch. But we don't. I can't wait to get to heaven to ask him, excuse me, mate, did you give it? Or did Andrew steal it? Or were you shamed into giving it over? We don't know. But somehow the lunch is transferred to Jesus. And here's the point. Jesus always transforms that which we transfer. Yeah? If we hold on to it, Jesus will do nothing with it. However we give it, whether it's willingly, and sometimes if we're honest, we give stuff to the Lord reluctantly. Yeah? I really don't want to give this up. I really don't want to do this. But, remember Moses? Lord, I can't lead these people, I'm slow of speech. Well, take your brother with you. Okay. Lord, I've got another excuse, And eventually he says, okay, I'll go. He wasn't that, he was a reluctant leader. But eventually he submitted. Even Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. Father, if it's possible, if there's any other way that we can do this, take this cup from me. I'm kind of having second thoughts about this now, Lord, Father. But, nevertheless, not mine, but yours. Whatever we transfer, Jesus will transform. So we have this little, meager, insufficient lunch transferred to a feast for a multitude by an all-sufficient God. The all-sufficient God can transform our insufficient provision. So whenever we're in that place where we think, who am I? Who are we? Why on earth would God use or choose or bother with us? God will always transform what we transfer. Here I am, said Isaiah. Here am I, send me. The little boy, Samuel, in the temple, thinks Eli, the priest, is the one that's calling him, and eventually Eli catches on. Church leaders can be really slow sometimes. Yeah. It took him 3 attempts for him to work out what was going on. The little boy comes, yeah, Eli, you called me. No, I didn't call you, go back to bed. Eli, you called me. No, go back to bed. 3rd time, oh, hang on, I know who this is. Go back to your bed and say, speak, Lord. Your servant is listening. And then Samuel's life is never the same again. Moses' life was never the same again because they, reluctantly or willingly, transferred their insufficiencies, their inadequacies, even their insecurities. Moses was a really insecure guy. At my core, you might think I'm really confident, but at my core, I'm really insecure. You ask me who I go into a situation where I don't know anyone, and if I don't have to talk to people, I won't. I'll be a little wallflower in the corner, just please leave me alone. But if I'm in a position where I have to speak to people, then I will. Like in my job, because it's my job, so I'll have to do it. So, church leaders, Moses was really insecure. And yet, in his insecurity, in his insufficiency, the all-sufficient, almighty, all-powerful, transcendent God took his insufficiency and made it more than sufficient. That's our God. That is our God. So I want to encourage you that whatever you are facing in your life, where you're thinking, I can't, or we can't. Who are we? What is this among so many? How on earth is this church ever going to impact and influence Inverness, as if that's not enough, and the Highlands, or as if that's not enough, and the world? I want to tell you right now, you can't. Because what you have is insufficient, but when you transfer it into the hands of the all-sufficient God, it becomes more than sufficient because of who He is. Not because of who you are, but because of who He is. You see, we need to recognize our own insufficiency before we can fully recognize the all-sufficiency of God. Sometimes we think it's all about us. You know that the story of Jesus walking on the water, and the disciples are in the boats, and there's a storm, and Jesus comes to walk on the water. And it's recorded in 3 of the Gospels. Maybe 4 of them, actually. I hadn't planned to know it's in 4 of them. It's in the 4 Gospels. Edit that. Because I'm so insufficient and insecure. So there's another Gospel, in one of the Gospels it tells us that Jesus went to pass them by. Because He knew what the outcome was. He knew they were going to meet on the other side. Because He told them, you go on ahead, I'm going to pray, I'll meet you on the other side. So He promised them, I'll meet you on the other side. But the storm comes up, and Jesus walks towards them on the water. And then as He gets near them, they see Him, they become afraid. And then He says, peace be still, and the storm just suddenly stops. And then Peter, when Jesus says, don't be afraid, Peter says, Lord, if that's you, call me to come and walk on the water. So Jesus says, okay, come on then. And Peter walks on water. And then when I preach it, when other people preach it, we make it all about us, make it all about Peter. And we say, you can be like Peter, you can walk on water. Whoa! But actually it's not about Peter, it's about Jesus. We make it about us. And we are insufficient. We are insignificant. We are insecure. We are whatever it is we are compared to the all-powerful, all-knowing, transcendent, omnipotent, all-sufficient God who calls us to partner with Him. It's great, isn't it? It's great. And then as if that wasn't enough, they're all fed, and make them all sit down on the grass. There's plenty of grass there. And God forbid they have to sit on the ground. They sit on the grass, thinks of comfort, and he distributes the bread and the fish. And then when it's all over, Jesus says, gather all the pieces. And there are baskets full of leftovers. You see, this all-sufficient God doesn't just provide enough. He provides more than enough. My God, your God, is the God of the leftovers. Anyone ever felt left out or left over? When I was in school, you can find this really hard to be because of my athletic physique. When it came to selecting people for football, you'd all like, the team captain would be picked, and they would go out and pick their team, and the other team would pick their one, and slowly, bit by bit, guess who was always left? Always, when it came to football, because I was rubbish. But 2 left feet, can't pick a ball, give me a racket, squash, tennis, badminton, I'm a killer. But with my feet, and I was always left out. I was always a leftover, but you can have them like times. But this story tells us that God, Jesus doesn't just disregard that which is left over. He gathers up that which is left over. He uses that which has been left over because he's the all-sufficient, all-powerful, all-knowing, transcendent, holy God. And he wants to partner with us. It's amazing, isn't it? So here's the application. It's great. It's a great story. Great to be motivated and inspired. Wow, just remember how great God is and how wonderful he is and that he wants to work. But unless we can apply it, it just becomes a story. So how do we apply this? Whatever you are facing today, whatever you're facing this week as an individual or as a family or as a church. First question, Jesus already knows. The first point, Jesus already knows what he's going to do. Second point, no matter how insufficient or insignificant what we have is, are we willing to give it to him? Or will we, unwillingly, still give it to him? Because whatever we transfer, he transforms. And if we hold on to it, he'll just say, okay, you carry on, you stick with what you've got. You see, God is looking for a people who are willing to trust him, even with what we think is insignificant. And let's be honest, it is. Andrew made the comment, what is that among so many? The needs of this city, the needs of the Highlands, the needs of this world are so overwhelming and vast that what you guys and what we can do or bring, it's nothing. But in the hands of El Shaddai, in the hands of the all-powerful, almighty, holy, transcendent God, you watch and see what he will do with what you have as you transfer it to him. So that's the challenge. When you face a situation this week, I'll tell you what our challenge is in a minute. Here's one for us, love. We got a phone call just over a week ago from the guy that owns the house that we're living in. We moved during lockdown. I would never recommend that. Don't move from one end of the country to the other during a pandemic. Not a good idea. But we did it, and God provided. And we just got the house the way we wanted it, and the gardens have been amazing, because I'm great in the garden. Not really, I've got no idea what to do, but it looks great because of the all-sufficient, all-powerful. My father's got green fingers, even though I haven't. But I got a phone call from the landlord saying, he decided to put the house on the market. We're like, say what? Yeah, you've got 2 months to get out. Okay. And at first I was like, oh, okay. And we felt quite calm, and God's got this, and let's put our faith to the test. And my Father, he's the all-sufficient one, he's the all-powerful, he can do it. That was great, so we started looking online, wasn't it? And then, you know what it's like, you're looking for a house, they all start to merge into one another, and the ones that you like are way outside your price range, or the ones that you fancy are really not in a great area, or they look great on the pictures. We went to see one last week, it looked great on the pictures. The photographs must have been taken 10 years ago, because it don't look nothing like the pictures. So we're like, you're alright, thank you. And it's time, so we're now 2 weeks, or a week down the road. The house that we're in has just gone on the market. We are fairly confident by the time we go home on Tuesday night, it will be sold. So that just adds more pressure. So am I willing to transfer this situation to the El Shaddai? That's my practical application. And actually, what choice have I got? Because I can't do anything. I can't suddenly magically create the perfect house in the right location for the right amount that ticks all our boxes. I can't. But the El Shaddai can. As you're looking for a home for this fellowship, who's the one that knows where and when and how. It's the when is the hard part, isn't it? It's the waiting. But in the waiting, we worship, we trust, we keep believing. So what is it, when you think about what is it that you are personally facing? Could be a health situation, could be a job situation, could be a relational issue, could be something to do with someone in your family, child or grandchild that's causing concern. Could be anything, a whole number of things. And do we hold on to it and worry and fret? What can I do? What can I do? What can I do? What is this among so much? It's insufficient. So we transfer it to the all-sufficient God. And you watch and see what he will. No one could have known what was going to happen that day. Nobody would have expected what happened to have happened. But Jesus already knew what he was going to do because he is El Shaddai. Father, I pray for each one of us. Whatever we're facing, God, help us to trust you. Because you know the outcome. You already know the end from the beginning. Lord, you specialize in miracles. You specialize in the outcome. But help us as we wait in the process of what you're doing for the outcome to happen. Lord, help us to trust you. Help us to believe you. And Lord, help us to be amazed at what you will do, because you are the miracle working God. Lord, right now, we transfer those things that concern us into your hands. Some of us are doing it right now willingly. Some of us may be reluctantly because we'd rather sort it out. But Lord, however we do it, help us to do it so that you can do what only you can do because of who you are. Lord, we thank you. Thank you for your word. Thank you for the fact that it just blesses, challenges, inspires us, helps us, even today. We give you the glory in Jesus' name. Amen.